Hello everybody, my name is Kaczmar, this is Geek Factor TV. What I have here for you today is a tutorial on how to play SUPERHOT, the card game. Now SUPERHOT, the card game is obviously based on the very popular video game. Now I got this demo version of the game from Board and Dice Publishers, which is a Polish publisher, which on January 31st, I don't know when you're watching this, is launching a Kickstarter campaign that is supposed to help fund the game. Now this is one of two episodes, English language episodes connected to this game. In the previous one I did a review, I gave my thoughts on the game. If you want to watch that, if you're interested in that, please click here and that link in the notification will take you to the previous episode where I told what I think about the game. But now let's get back to the tutorial. Now, what I have in this demo version that I received from Board and Dice, I have here a solo variant, which is supposed to be the basic variant of this game, which kind of makes sense since the video game itself is a first-person shooter. But there are going to be other variants in the game itself once it's published. So the rules I'm going to talk to you about, they all apply to the solo variant, which is the only one I have here in this deck of cards. Now in this game, pretty much like in the video game this game is based on, you're going to be moving through different, sometimes weird looking locations, trying to defeat various enemies, all in order to complete various mission objectives. Those mission objectives will help you get from one level to another. And through completing those levels you will be able to win the game. If you die, you will lose the game. Now, before I get to how to set up the game, let me talk to you a little bit about the cards and what you can find on them. Firstly, you have the goal cards. Goal cards represent various objectives that you have to fulfill in order to complete them. Once you've completed enough goals, you've completed a level. Then you have the bullet cards. Bullet cards are the ones that you're gonna have to avoid in order to survive the game. Lastly, you have the obstacle cards. Obstacle cards are basically divided into two halves. Every card has a bottom half and an upper half. They represent various things you encounter while making it through the level, or various enemies you encounter. Now, if you look, there are two kinds of symbols that you see on the cards, as well as this kind of symbol, which is kind of like a mixture of the two. Now, those are so-called attack symbols. Those are the dodge symbols. When you have the obstacle cards in your hand, you just care about the upper half. You completely ignore the bottom half of the card. And these represent the values that you can spend. Now so for example, for this card you can spend 2 attack, and with this card you can spend 2 dodge. Some cards don't have any symbols, but instead they have various abilities that you can use in order to, well, make your situation a little bit better. When the cards are in the center obstacle line, you'll see what I'm talking about in just a minute. You only care about the bottom half and ignore the upper half. Those symbols and values then represent the amount you have to spend from your hand in order to get rid of this particular obstacle. So for example, in order to get rid of this obstacle, which is a guy with a gun, you have to spend 2 attack. So if you have a card on your hand that has 2 attack to spend, you can spend it in order to get rid of this card. Those cards also have various abilities on the bottom which are turned on during the round. Also, there is a special set of so-called starting cards which are basically just the same as the regular obstacle cards, but they have a symbol in the upper right corner. In this demo version that I have, the symbol is basically a simple P1. So that's the basic information you need to know about the cards themselves, and now let's see how to properly set up the game. First, you take all the bullet cards and place them face up in the upper right hand section of your gameplay area. Then you take the goal cards, you give them a good shuffle, you draw one of the goal cards and you place it on the upper left corner of your play area. Bear in mind, you have a chance to veto this goal, which means you can set it aside and draw another one from the deck, but bear in mind, you're only setting it aside, you're not discarding it and getting rid of it from the game, which means it will come into play on your next turn, on your next mission basically. You can set the other goal cards to the side. Now you take all the obstacle cards, minus the starting cards, and you give them all as well a good shuffle, and then you play 6 of them face up to form a center obstacle line. You put the other obstacle cards in a face-up deck on the left side of the center line. Then you take the bottom 9 cards from this deck, you add 1 bullet to those 9 cards, you shuffle them, and then, without looking, you place it again at the bottom of the obstacle deck. Then you take the starting cards, you give them a good shuffle, you draw 4 of them, this is your starting hand, and you take the other ones and you place them right here. This is your player deck. Next to your player deck, leave some space for a player discard pile. Now this area right here is basically going to be divided into 2 areas. This is the so-called new cards area, and this is the so-called used cards area. Because during the game you'll be playing cards, you'll be discarding them, you'll be getting rid of some cards from the center line and you'll be placing them in front of you. So just so you know, you can, I don't know, maybe you can use some pieces of paper and write it down on them. This is the new cards area, this is the used cards area.
So now you're ready to play. Now, in order to finish the game, to win the game, you have to complete those objectives that are on those mission cards. There is a specific point in a turn when you check to see if you fulfill the requirements on this given goal card that is currently active, but more on that later. So the whole game will be played for a series of turns, and every turn is divided into 7 steps. Now, let's see how those steps play out.
So step 1 is basically looking at the center line and deciding what you want to do next. If things are looking good and you want to keep playing, then you proceed to step 2. If you have some issues though and you want to wait it out a bit, then you can pass this turn. Now what you do when you pass is you take the cards in your hand, you remove any number of cards from your hand, whatever number you want, except if you have any bullet cards in your hand. You cannot remove bullet cards from your hand. But you can remove any cards you want and place them in your discard pile. Then you take the rightmost card from the center line and again you put it in your player discard pile. And then you proceed to step 6. But let's just say that for now I want to keep playing, I don't want to get rid of any cards. Step 2 is using cards. Now what do? First of all, I'm only looking at the 6 cards that form the center obstacle line. I'm completely ignoring the first face-up card on the obstacle deck. So like I said before when I was talking to you about the cards, now I can choose, I can look at the obstacle line and decide what cards I want to interact with. Now when I interact with a card, I have to pay the card's cost. Now like I said, right now I'm ignoring the upper half, I'm only looking at the bottom half of those cards. So for example, let's say I want to get rid of this guy because at the end of the turn this guy is going to shoot at me. So what I have to do is I have to pay the cost. The cost is listed right here. I know what you're thinking, I should probably take care of the guy with the shotgun first, but his cost is 5, either attack or dodge, any mixture of the two. But I don't have that many cards on my hand, I don't have that value on my hand. I have the value to get rid of this card, for example. So what I do is I discard as many cards from my hand as I need to pay that value, to match that value. Like I said, when I'm using cards, when I'm discarding, playing cards from my hand, I'm only looking at the bottom, at the upper side of the card. I'm ignoring the bottom half right now, and I'm putting them in the used cards area. Now I can, just slide it down a bit to make sure I remember that I did deal with this card. Now, when I'm dealing with a card from the obstacle line, I basically have 2 options. I can either destroy it or knock it out. When I knock a card out, I'm basically turning it face up and I'm leaving it in the obstacle line. Face up cards' abilities don't turn on and they don't interact with me in any way. But when I choose to destroy a card, I'm putting it in the new card area. Remember, I don't have to play any cards that allow me to interact, to destroy or knock out any of the cards in the center line. I can, for example, play a card called Plan, which just says draw 2 cards. So I can play this card, put it in the used cards area, and draw 2 cards from my player deck. If, for example, there was a bullet card in the center line, I could have played 2 cards that give me the dodge value of 2, put it in this area, and then get rid of a bullet card. But when I destroy a bullet card, I do not put it in this area. This card goes back to the bullet deck. So when I'm done with this, when I decide, okay, I'm not playing any more cards, this is when I move to step
3. This is where I take the cards from the new cards area and then I add it to my hand. Now, there is no upper limit of the cards I can have in my hand. There is, however, a limit that if I have fewer than 4 cards in my hand, I have to draw back up to 4 from my player deck. Now, whenever my player deck is depleted, I have to take the discard pile, shuffle it to form a new player deck. Now it's time for step 4, time moves. First of all, I count the number of cards I played by counting the cards that are in the used cards area. Then I remove as many cards from the rightmost side of the center line. So let's just say I played 3 cards, which means I'm getting rid of these 3 cards. Now, here's the thing. If, for example, during this second step, I would have gotten rid of this card, there would be an empty slot here. Now, that doesn't mean that I would go 1, 2, and 3. No, I treat this empty slot as if a card was still there. So I would then remove this card and this card because it would go like 1, 2, and 3. The removed cards go into my player discard pile. If I were to remove any bullets, they would not go to my player discard pile, they would go into my hand. Now remember, if at any moment during the game I have 4 bullet cards in my hand, I lose the game. Now all the cards from the used cards area form the obstacle discard pile. Now it's time for step 5, which is mission check, but I'll talk to you about that more in just a second. Let's move on for now to step 6, which is check the center line. Now I look at all the cards still remaining in the center line and I look for any abilities. For example, this card doesn't have any abilities printed on it, but this one does. It says, at the end of the turn, draw an extra card, which for example with this card would mean I'd draw an extra card from my player deck. Now there might be enemies in the center line and they also have abilities and they shoot bullets. And for example, this one says, at the end of the turn, shoot 1 bullet. Now you count up all the bullets that are shot during this step of the turn. You take as many bullet cards from the bullet deck and you place them on the obstacle discard pile. Now it's step 7, which is refill the center line. I slide all the cards that are still remaining here, I slide them to the right, and I add more cards to the center line to make sure I have 6 cards in the center obstacle line.
So once you've completed this 7th step, this is usually when you would start a new turn. And every turn goes exactly the same way. You get to step 1, you see if you want to maybe take a pass and go immediately to step 6, or maybe you just decide to go, hey, I'm good, let's go through and let's go on to the next step. Once you've completed the 7th step, you go back to step 1, you begin a whole new turn. Before I talk to you about the various conditions on winning and losing the game, let's get back to step 5, which is checking the mission objective and seeing if you've actually fulfilled the requirements that are printed on the active goal card. And if they are, let's see what happens then.
When you look at the goal card and you see that you have fulfilled all the requirements printed on it, what you do is you discard it from the game. Then you take the goal card pile and you shuffle it, and then you draw new goal cards. Now if it's the 2nd level, you draw 2 goal cards. If it's the 3rd level, you draw 3 goal cards. You place them in the exact same spot and those are your new goals. Now you take all the cards from the obstacle center line, from the obstacle discard pile and from the obstacle deck. You gather them together and you give them a good shuffle. Once you've done that, you place 6 cards to form a new center line and you place a new obstacle deck to the left hand side face up. And lastly, you take all the cards from your hand, your cards from your player deck and your cards from your player discard pile. You shuffle them together, you draw 4 of them to form a new hand, and the rest you keep as your player deck. And then you start a new turn.
Naturally, if the mission objective is not fulfilled, you move on to step 6 and you continue with your turn. You only do the thing I just told you about if you've actually fulfilled this requirement. That's basically all you need to know to play the game. Now, in order to win the game, like I said, you have to complete all the levels. So in level 1 you have to complete 1 goal card, in level 2 you have to complete 2 goal cards, and in the final level 3 you have to complete all 3 goal cards. If you've completed 3 goal cards on the 3rd level, you've won the game.
Now, that is the only way to win the game. There are far more ways of actually losing the game. How do you do that? Well, first of all, like I said, if you have 4 bullet cards on your hand at any given moment, you die, which means losing the game. Another thing is, if this deck of bullet cards run out, that means that all the bullet cards are either in the center line, in the obstacle deck, in your hand, or in your player deck. That means there are just simply too many bullets flying around, you have no chances of getting out of it alive. That means you also lose. Other reasons include, first of all, the obstacle cards. If there are no obstacle cards, if there are not enough obstacle cards either in the obstacle discard pile or in the obstacle deck, if there are not enough obstacle cards to make up for a 6-card center line, then you also lose. The same goes for your player cards. If at any moment during the game you don't have enough cards in your discard pile or in your deck or in your hand to have 4 cards, at least 4 cards in your hand, that also means you've run out, you die, you lose the game. So there are 4 ways to lose the game, only 1 to actually win. So this is basically it. This is all you need to know to play SUPERHOT, the card game. This is, like I said, this is the solo variant. If once the other variants become available, you will be able to learn more about them. And now, once the Kickstarter campaign starts, I will add the link to the Kickstarter campaign in the description below. So if you decide, hey, this looks good, I want to back this project instantly, you can just go down and click the link in order to get there. So if you have any questions on how to play the game, or if you already know from some other source how to play the game, and you've noticed I made a mistake, please feel free to comment below and I'll address those comments as soon as I get a chance. But for now, I think this is it. So thank you for watching. Thank you to big thanks to Board and Dice for giving me this demo version, and I strongly recommend you check out the Kickstarter campaign once it goes live, or if it already went live, just click the link in the description. Thank you so much, and as always, I dearly invite you to subscribe, comment, like, and obviously to continue watching and continue playing. Thank you so much. See you later. Bye.